So let's go through the infrastructure for the repository here. So first we have the providers right here. We need to start out with this whenever we are designing a Terraform project. So we define the providers that we're using right here, and then we also connect to the remote backend, which is a project that I have on Terraform Enterprise. I'll get more to that later. And then when we define this, we also need to specify these inputs so that it can connect to the Terraform Enterprise workspace, which in turn can connect to the Azure subscription and create our resources for us. I also have the local file right here. These are just commonly used files. We're going to be making mostly everything inside of the dev environment, but we also have the staging and prod environment for other things that we may want to create or test in. And we have the resource group. So right here, I just had the environments block right there. So this is going to loop through all the environments that we had for dev, staging, and production, and it's going to make a resource group for each one of them. Then I have the virtual network, where the virtual network is going to be important when it comes to creating our resources and allowing them to be able to communicate properly. The virtual network is the resource that draws everything together and makes it allow to either speak with each other or create private endpoints or be able to be accessible over the internet. We have some storage accounts right here. Now I have set these so that I have the public network access to be true, and then even if I go to selected networks, I also have it be with 0.0.0.0/0, and that just means that it can communicate to anything over the internet. So both of those effectively do the same thing, whether I'm allowing the whole public network access to be true, but even if I do it to selected networks, I say allow all of them through. And then I have a couple of containers that I allow for this as well. Next, we have the SQL server, and then the database that is associated with it, and the other corresponding resources that are either going to put security measures within or are going to allow us to communicate with it. So we have the SQL server right here. And once again, the public network access is being set to true. That is for testing purposes. But normally on this, you would want to limit about how much access it has over the internet, such as a range of VPN IP addresses. We have the SQL database right here. We have the private endpoint, private DNS zone, private DNS zone virtual network link, a DNS record. This is what helps to enable our transparent data encryption, TDE configuration. So we have the service managed key right here, the advanced data security configuration, security alert policy, and the vulnerability assessment. So these all work with the SQL server. Next, let's move on to the Azure Key Vault that we're going to be using. This is where we're going to be storing our sensitive information. And then we also are going to be using it for customer managed keys. So instead of Azure taking care of the keys and doing all of that for us, we are the ones that are going to be taking care of this. So it's our responsibility so that we can have more control over what it's doing. The private endpoint for the Key Vault, private DNS zone for the Key Vault, private DNS zone virtual network link, customer managed key for the SQL encryption, and then Key Vault access policy for the SQL server. This is one last resource at the end here. We use it in a few different places. Whenever you see the data word right here, that means that it's just going to be a reference to something. So this is something that already exists on Azure, and we just need a reference to it. We also have the function app, which is what's going to be taking requests. And it's going to be sitting there being serverless until it's told to do something. So we have the storage account right here, the service plan that we are going to be following right here, Y1. And then we have the function app itself. This is going to be important when we set the identity. We need to set it so that it's a system assigned managed identity, so that when we create our role assignments later, it will be specifically for the resource and not for everything. Here are some certain app settings and life cycles that we're going to be following as well. These do well a lot with being able to debug everything and being able to reset everything. And you may not exactly need all of them, but if you are going to be deploying this yourself, then it will be helpful to have them. They'll help you debug. There's some Azure policies that are being followed right here. Now, remember you have the data keyword right here where you can reference something that already exists in Azure. So what's being done right here is that I'm saying get the policy that has this name within it, and then I'm just putting it inside of my own data reference right here. So I have these 4 different policies that I'm going to be following, and they have a certain value that goes with them. And this is what I found to be the simplest solution when creating them through Infrastructrre. And then we are going to be creating those policy assignments down here. So up here, we're just referencing that they exist on Azure, but then down here, we're actually going to be creating them. Now you'll see this last one down here at the bottom is one that I have commented out because it's not being used. And that's because in a couple of places we allow public network access to be set to true. And this policy prevents that. The policy is saying that it's not going to allow that to happen. So it had to be commented out so that we could continue with the project. We have the managed identity, which is going to be assigning role assignments so that our resources can behave the way that we want them to. And down here with this one, this is what I was talking about earlier, where we are wanting to be assigning the role assignment to the resource specifically. So we are telling it to assign it to the Linux function app. And since it had the system assigned managed identity from before, we can just tell it SQL Server Security Manager for that principal ID. We have the monitor over here on the left. These ones are not required, but they are certainly helpful if we want to get some information on what's going on the Azure portal. We have commands that we can run where we can query information that's being passed through it, and it can tell us what's going on. For example, when I create the rule, it's only supposed to last for 1 hour, so I can check on the application insights to see how much time is left. Maybe it'll say, though, there's 27 minutes. So I can use these to get information and be able to process that information. We have a couple of other files here, which if you're familiar with Terraform, this isn't really anything new. These are various variables that we are going to be using. So they're all declared right here. They have default values right here. So if something is not declared, then it goes to the default value. But if something is declared, then it overrides whatever is in the default value. And we have the outputs as well. So there's important information that we need to be able to access from outside of all of this code. So we can put those here, such as if somebody wanted to access the resource group name here, we can make it be an output, and it allows this information to be able to be more easily passed around. So I've declared all of these outputs right here. Now, remember that when we are connecting this to a Terraform Enterprise project, that this allows us that whenever we are making changes to it, that it's going to run some checks and it's going to tell us on the Terraform Enterprise what those changes are going to be. So we can see here that based off of the changes, which is nothing right here, all I did was open up this pull request for a test, that when we have this right here, it's going to tell us about what sort of effects it's going to have on the whole thing. So this is what it shows in GitHub. And then this is what it's going to look like on Terraform Enterprise. So there's some different projects right here. I have this one that's connected to the GitHub repository. If we go over here to variables and look over here, then there are some of the values which you may have noticed were not variables that were declared, but they're still being passed around there. And the way that they're able to be passed around here is because of what we have here, where we can declare them inside of the Terraform Enterprise workspace, and then they can still pass around. Now, some of these are sensitive values, as you can see. Some of them are only for write only, and they're not supposed to be seen at all by us. So we can declare that they are only write and that they are never read, so they can still be passed around the code and used properly. If we go over here to the runs, then we can see what will happen, because when we make a pull request, it's going to make something here, and then it's going to, for the sections where it says planned and finished, that means that it was just a pull request. But for these other ones, those are when it's been merged or when we've possibly run a new plan on our own. If we go up here to new run, then we can specify that we want to run our own one. So those ones either need to be applied, which will be successful, or when we apply them, it will error, and we would need to take a look at those errors. So we have these other discarded ones or canceled ones that I didn't want to use. I didn't want to apply those. And this is how we can manage the infrastructure that we have on our Azure subscription, and that's how it's done for this project.